1,733 houses burnt in Bijapur, 1,092 houses burnt in Konta, and these are huge underestimates. And none of them have got, and over the years we have many, many more complaints, right? So what has been submitted to the Supreme Court over these last 20 years is some, 833 individual complaints. Many of them are not even individual because they are mass atrocities, right? The whole village got burnt. And this many organizations found, the NHRC also found, the Supreme Court also found that they were all guilty, and yet nobody has got anything.
What they were doing was completely legal, and since 2021, they've been sitting continuously on protest. They started with the Silgate firing. So for three and a half years, they had carried out peaceful protests, continually in dialogue with the SPs, the collectors of the districts. And yet you thought that this kind of opposition is something that the government is not willing to tolerate. And in fact, the notification banning them also, the allegation against them is that they're opposing the development works of the government and opposing the security camps and roads and bridges that are being built to implement this development works of the development policies of the government. So very clearly that opposition to development works or development policies is what's being highlighted even in the government notification. It's not an allegation of violent activities. It's not, secessionist activities. It is, for the first time, we're seeing the opposition of development works of the government is enough to actually criminalize a whole generation of people and illegitimize So the government's thing is very clear that we're not in a mood to tolerate any kind of opposition to what we want to put forth.
In fact, I just wanted to say, even Manish Kunjam, who's such a leader of such long standing, his house was raided. They have been from January onwards raising allegations of corruption in the Tendu bonus distribution, and the police raided his house and took away his phones. He's the one who complained about the allegations, and they're raiding his phones in the Tendu scam.
Hello, I'm Ajoy Ashirwad. Welcome to this show, and today we'll be discussing a topic which has largely gone unnoticed or has been discussed only by a section of media from a very partisan perspective. Last week, we heard that the topmost Maoist leader, Keshava Rao, who's also known as Basavaraju, was killed in an encounter. And after that, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah also tweeted in a celebratory mood. Of course, it's an important milestone in their operation, which is known as Operation Kagar, a military operation in India's central Chhattisgarh, Bastar jungles, where they've been carrying out a military operation for over 2 months, in which Amit Shah also promised that India will be Maoist free by April 2026. This is perhaps the first time when a home minister has set a deadline to wipe out what he calls as wiping out Maoists, and that has its own implications. So we'll be discussing, we have two very eminent guests today, and we'll be discussing with them what does the killing of Basavaraju mean, what does it mean for Bastar jungles, which has been the center of Maoist activities for almost 3 decades now, and generally we will be also discussing that is this kind of a military operation where a lot of new kind of weapons were used in Bastar and its jungles, the adivasi inhabited jungles. Is it kind of a new thing, or is it warranted in a country like India, where, or especially in places where people don't have so much access to basic facilities also. So we'll be discussing all of that, and today we have Nandini Sundar with us, who's a professor in Delhi University, but also a very eminent human rights activist who was instrumental in getting the Salwa Judum, a vigilante group in Bastar, banned by the Supreme Court, and she's also written this very great book detailing what is happening in Bastar. It's called The Burning Forest, India's War in Bastar. And we also have Shalini Gera, who's also a prominent human rights lawyer and has been taking many cases in Bastar of adivasis who have been victims of human rights abuses. Welcome to both of you. So Nandini, I'll like to start with you. So this is of course a very important milestone for the Indian government, the killing of Basavaraju. He was the General Secretary of the Maoist party. And so once he's killed, and many observers are also kind of talking about this may be the decisive end for Maoist activities. But how do you kind of see this development in Bastar, and what is it like? This is also for the first time a Home Minister has set a deadline for what he calls is wiping out an insurgent group. How do you look at this development?
So it's definitely a major marker in the history of insurgency, counter-insurgency in Bastar. And the Maoists the People's War came into Bastar in the 80s. So it's been about 40 years now. And to kill the General Secretary of a party is a very major thing to have happened. And if you see, both the CPI, CPM, Male, all of them did condemn the way that he was killed rather than arrested. The Maoists have actually been issuing letters. They've sent out 5 letters now asking for a ceasefire. And in several of the letters, there were some indications that, they wanted a ceasefire in order to talk among themselves, because at the rate that the killing has been going on, the operations have been going on, it seems that the government simply wants to wipe them out militarily rather than deal with the issues that have been raised, right? So the Maoists became popular in this area because of people's problems with the forest department, with the Patwaris, with the oppression that they were facing in their everyday life. Even though the Maoists came to Bastar in order to create a base, but then they spread because they were responding to some felt need among people. So without responding to that need, just to wipe out a party militarily is actually not going to solve anything. So even if Amit Shah says that we're going to obliterate Maoism by 2026 or whenever, the issues haven't gone away. Secondly, if you don't allow people to talk, it's possible that if the Maoists were allowed a ceasefire and they were allowed to talk among themselves, they would come to the conclusion that they want to give up arms, or I'm just saying it hypothetically, since they have to talk, I have no idea. But if you're not allowing them that possibility and you're just wiping them out militarily, what is likely to happen is that 2 things. One is that the fact that there will always be some Maoists to mop up, as they say, will mean that the government will continue with their security camps. Right now there are security camps every 2 to 5 kilometers, and the local people really hate that, right? Because these camps have come up overnight on their land. They've been they're intrusive, they're difficult for people to live their normal lives. So people really want the camps gone. So if there is a political resolution, then the government no longer has any reason to keep the camps there. Whereas if they do this military approach, there will always be some Maoists and some. So if there are peace talks, there is no excuse, right? Because there are not going to be any Maoists. The second thing is that if there are peace talks, then anybody who still has arms will not be, will then just be, an ordinary person and will not be somebody that the government will want to, will have the excuse for saying that there is still a Maoist group. And what we've seen in Jharkhand is that the government has encouraged all these splinter Maoist groups, so like Tritiya Prastuti, etc., who are actually covert agents for the police. So, you know, right now we're hearing of people being killed in Jharkhand, but these are people who have been working with the police and not necessarily, they're not kind of oppositional. In fact, Tritiya Prastuti says that their main enemy is the Maoists, CPI Maoist. So, the worry is that if you don't have a political resolution, then the Maoists could also, you know, splinter into these groups, and then you will never have any kind of peace for villagers, or because, you know, mining companies will use them as agents, anybody can use them as criminal agents because people are armed out there, 1 or 2 people form a small band. So we really need a political resolution of this rather than a military wiping out.
Yeah. So Nandini, you raised a very important point that these killings, especially like over 200 Maoists have been allegedly killed. 2,000 alleged Maoists have been killed over the last 2 months or 2.5 months, and over 7,000 people have, the police claims they've been arrested. But the villagers many villagers and many observers have also claimed that not all of them are say Maoists. Many of them were villagers who've been arrested, and many innocent villagers have been killed in staged encounters and were later claimed that they were Maoist. So these questions aside, but you raised an important point that these killings have happened when the Maoists have been kind of requesting the government to come out for peace talks and have a political resolution. And like you said, that the whole situation needs a political resolution. We have seen similar operations before, Operation Green Hunt, and before that we had seen similar military operations, but nothing could kind of, say, quote unquote, wipe out Maoists from them, because the ground, the problems because of which Maoists came into the picture and many other civil society groups or human rights activists came into the picture are still left unaddressed. So how do you see, like for example, in a hypothetical situation, the Maoists are gone from Bastar, and then many observers also claim that the whole idea of kind of having a completely military operation and wiping out resistance is also a way for the government forces to let the private mining companies go. We all know that Bastar is iron ore rich and many other minerals are also there. So, and the Maoists were at the forefront of resisting these attempts by the Indian government to push mining companies. And similarly, like the Maoists, there were other groups also, like Mulvasi Bachao Andolan in South Bastar, and there was a group in North Bastar also, I think Samanvay Samiti. So all of these, like these were also kind of brutally handled by the security forces. So it seems like the Adivasis there, the inhabitants there, they are not allowed their dissent or any form of speech to resist or put forward their demands. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'll let Shalini respond on the mining question. I just want to say one small thing is that now that the government wants to do this in a military fashion without talks, and if the camps stay, if there is any protest about mining, then the camps and the DRG will be turned on the people rather than being turned on the Maoists. In fact, that's really the worry, because the Supreme Court had banned the use of SPOs in 2011, and the government simply changed the name of these SPOs, who were basically surrendered Maoists and some others, into DRG, right? So if there are no Maoists, these DRG people who've been used to getting rewards now for killings, and they've also been known, I mean, they've been involved in a number of human rights abuses. So what are they going to do? They're going to basically turn on people. They're not a disciplined force in that sense. They're not going to go quietly to the, and what use will the government have for them? Because they are an auxiliary force. They're not part of the regular. So there is a serious danger that these will then become an extension of a mining state, you know, agents of a mining state.
Because Shalini, we hear that there are over 250 security camps there, and last year when we saw Mulwasi Bachao Andolan's almost a year-long protest before it was again outlawed, they were also, their leaders were also claiming that the security forces were laid out in a way so to kind of, which may assist mining companies to set up their mines and alienate their rights to their jungle or zameen. And so, how do you look at this whole wiping out any form of resistance to mining, and the state at the same time granting a number of, like last I remember in 2022, 51 mining licenses were given in South Bastar, and only 12 of which were public sector, rest all of them were private companies, and this and the villagers claim that they were not consulted before the government took these kind of decisions, and they fear that the land in which they stay, the government is setting up security forces, are actually to assist mining. Is there kind of any truth to it?
No, that's the big fear that everybody has. And that's what we've seen up till now, that the security forces are not there for the security of the people, but they're more for the security of the mines and the ore that is going out from there, and to extend the roads, etc. That we fear are largely for extraction of ore or timber or something like that, the extractive industries. And any resistance to it, any form of resistance to it, has up till now been tagged as being Naxalites, and therefore has been brutally suppressed. And for that, I'd like to talk about North Bastar, Kanker, the district of Kanker, which has a lot of iron ore mines already operational and more in the planning. And the biggest of them is the Rauhat iron ore mine. And it got all its clearances in 2009. And the government had been trying for a while to set it to kind of open it for mining, but 1998, etc., it was turned down by the same government, saying that the forests are too good, the people are too dependent, and we're not going to allow it. But suddenly all that drops in 2009. They open it and give it clearances for mining. But then also at that time, it was that, you're only going to be allowed mining if you do all these people friendly things. You have to do so many hospitals, so many schools, etc. From 2009 to 2025, and that's like how many years? 16 years. We haven't seen, they talked about a hospital, a tertiary care hospital. We haven't seen even one brick of that laid in the area. They talked about like day boarding schools and various other schools in the we're not seeing any of that. But the mining has started. The whole idea of that, as you said, public sector, it was reserved from the 1960s. That block has been reserved for public sector. So it was supposed to go for the Bhilai steel plant. Nico Jaiswal wanted in it, but they were turned down because it had to go to the Bhilai steel plant. But today what we are seeing, it is still being owned by the Bhilai steel plant, but the ore from there is going to Nico Jaiswal. Like of the 2 million tons per annum, 1.5 etc. is earmarked for Nico Jaiswal. And also the operations, including the rehabilitation, the employment, all of that is also by the private sector. There's an MDO by the, I think, ACB, which is close to the government in power right now. And they are doing all the operations. So just the name of a public sector doesn't mean anything. It is eventually all for the benefit of the private sector. And like that, many other blocks have been opened up. You talked about 2022. But after that, we have seen one gold block open up in has been auctioned in Kanker. We have seen 3 iron ore blocks prepared for auction in Narayanpur. We've seen 1 iron ore block in Bijapur. This is where the so-called Maoists have been wiped out from right now. So all this is going hand in hand with this clearing of
These
the
are
area.
all part of the Bastar region, north and south included.
The 7 districts of Bastar. These are all districts of Bastar. These are new blocks that are being opened up. And we're talking of huge amounts of land. I mean, the one iron ore block in Narayanpur is 1,000 hectares. 3 blocks have just been auctioned in Belladilla, 1A, 1B, 1C. They together are over 2,500 hectares. So we're talking about huge amounts of land being given to mining industries right now. And it's not just mining. I mean, we have several months ago, there was big in the news that some 55,000 hectares of land in Narayanpur was going to be, earmarked for an army maneuver range. So we're talking of large, huge, immense tracts of land. Now, these are lands that haven't even been surveyed yet. I mean, Narayanpur, that Abujamar area, that has not even been surveyed yet, but we're already earmarking it, and planning that these private parties are going to get it. As you said, it's all private sector now. The 3 blocks in Belladilla, ArcelorMittal, Rupta, they're the ones who've got it. It's Bajrang Ispat in Kanker that is getting land. So these are the companies that are coming in. We're not even the fig leaf of public sector is now being taken away.
Yes.
It's completely private sector.
Yeah, but Shalini, I would like to, the most of the government officials you talk to, they have a very clear-cut logic that people, the Maoist party, for example, the other civil society groups who have resisted these kind of attempts against putting up mining plants there, the government officials see that because of these kind of political activities in these jungles, the government was kind of unsuccessful in getting development going, and only when the Maoists or these kind of civil society resistance groups are gone from the region, then development can happen. So how do you kind of
what I'm saying, the examples we've seen so far
can generate employment, can then give the state enough funds to generate funds to set up hospitals or education schools.
That's exactly what I'm talking about also. What is our vision of development? Yes, our vision of development would be schools and hospitals, but are they really coming in from the mining companies? That is what I'm saying. If it was, we have had mining in the Belladilla since the 1960s. Dantewada, with the amount of iron ore, that's the best quality iron ore, with the amount of iron ore that's been mined, it should have been the top of the development index. Where is Dantewada right now? Very much at the bottom. Raughat, I mean, that's what I'm saying. In 2009, the whole clearance was given with strict conditions of employment generation for locals, for schools and hospitals. 2025, we haven't seen any of that. And in fact, the government's own record, I mean, they have to do environment compliance reports. They've also said that, for wildlife, for instance, they were supposed to give so much money. But all we are seeing from wildlife is not really, or schools, it's civil construction work. Just the money that has been earmarked for education, that's going for building boundary walls of schools. It's not for teachers. It's not for school buildings. It's not for, getting more things. It's for boundary walls. What kind of development are we talking about in this case? Why haven't we not seen the clearance clearly said that you start teaching the students now, so when you're ready for mining, you already have a class of students who are ready to take the benefit of the employment that's going to be generated.
Is employment being generated in the mines which are already operational?
Earlier there was. So I would say in NMDC in Belladilla, when it started,
that's
it was
a public sector company. Yeah.
They started with, and there's a whole generation of people who did benefit from it. But now it's all contracted out. So in Belladilla, for instance, we have the MDO contract for one deposit 13 was famously given to Adani. So they are not generating. In Raughat, we've been doing RTIs to say how much employment is going to be generated. We're asking. They're saying that only the MDO, the ACB knows. We don't know anything.
They're not giving clear-cut answers.
And they're not generating. I mean, on the ground, we know it's all contractors. It's all, you get some money for contract employees, but there is no permanent permanent employment so far that has been given out.
Yeah, so that may be one of the reasons which where the Adivasis feel that their lands, that tradition is being violated, and they are being exploited. Or how do you like to intervene?
I just want to say that right now, Manish Kunjam and others, Bastariya Raj Morcha, have raised the demand that in NMDC, which has been functioning for so many years, even the contract employees are mostly from outside. So they've been demanding bharti for local people, and that's not been a concern for the NMDC. So even if you look at all the contractors, they're all from outside, or they're people close to the BJP at best, some local people. So even in terms of employment, there's already the benefits are only going to people from outside, not to local Adivasis.
So that has been actually a pattern in not just Bastar mines, but everywhere where there are private mines where local peoples are never employed, but migrant laborers are employed, and they are not given any benefits by most, even in North Chhattisgarh.
But I'd like to just add one point to that. You were talking about the whole security narrative that goes along with it. That's also extremely prominent when it comes to mining. For instance, in Raughat again, the BSP, it was given the clearance 2009. Mining didn't start till 2021. The delays are because BSP was busy constructing security camps for taking up the ore. So they've given money for 22 camps, BSF as well as CRPF camps. And it's very clearly, it's along the road or the railway line. It's really clearly for just securing the transportation of ore. It's not for securing the well-being of people. When it comes to the money, the CSR funds or the DMF funds, they're also being diverted to the security camps. So the BSP is saying for 18 security camps that they built, they gave 90 crore rupees.
Yes.
So if that had instead gone to schools or hospitals, that would have been development. But just building security camps is not development. In Korba, which is not Bastar, but still the Korba DMF money was being utilized for building the Bilaspur airport. Now, how are people of the affected communities going to benefit from an airport? But that's the kind of diversion of funds we also see. For saying it is there that companies will come in here, you will get the capital to the development. What development are we seeing?
The profit seems to be the main motive. So, Nandini, as a long time watcher of the region, there's one security narrative going on. Then there's, like, apart from the social development narrative, the Adivasis of the region, they also kind of have certain guarantees. We have the PESA Act, we have the Forest Rights Act, and also the guarantees in the Constitution through the 5th schedule. How has been the implementation of these acts which kind of guarantee some kind of immunity and social security to the Adivasis of Bastar there?
Implementation entirely in the breach, I would say, right? Because if you look at even the security camps, many of them have come up on common lands or on the lands that people have been cultivating for which they don't have pattas. Also, it's important to remember that, when Salvajudum went and burnt all these villages, people lost all their pattas, they lost all their documents, even caste certificates. So for them now to be able to prove that they have been cultivating and all is very difficult. So when these security camps come up, the first thing they should have done is ask people, whether it's okay with them. If you're there to protect the villagers, you say that you're there for the security of the villagers, and you don't even ask them, and you say you're coming up overnight to avoid any problems, then whose security are you there for, right? And so they violated PESA. The implementation of forest rights, again, Shalini has been working on that, so maybe she can answer.
Yeah, the big thing why forest rights and PESA was just such a landmark legal, achievements in legislation, was that they actually gave a say to the local communities about what kind of development they want. So both of them empowered the Gram Sabhas in these areas, which is just an assembly of all the adults of the village to say whether they wanted something or not. And again, as Nandini has pointed out, we have not seen the implementation anywhere. In deposit number 13 of Belladilla, there was a huge agitation by people to say that when Adani was given the the go ahead to do the mining over there, there was no consent from the people. But on the papers, there was a Gram Sabha resolution. And eventually, I mean, the people pointed out that we had dead people signing it, we have, minors signing it. Who has really, it was a fraudulent Gram Sabha resolution. And eventually, after huge agitation over there, did the government finally agree to look into it? And that was in 2019. And finally, even 4 years after that, it has been actually the clearance has been withdrawn. The block is still with the NMDC, but the clearance to go ahead has been stopped. But that's the same thing we see in Neko Jaiswal. The people over there have raised the same issue, that we haven't even had the surveys over here. How has our consent been taken? How has this been given? There is no answer. In Raughat, it's the same issue. No consent from the affected villagers has been taken. That is why people are up in arms. And it's not even that if the consent was taken, that maybe all of them would say no to mining. They would probably want to negotiate something. And that was the whole idea of these acts, that it gives a say. What do you want in return? What kind of development do you want? How much of ore do you want at this point? What are you willing to give? Some say in it.
Make them the stakeholders.
Right. As of today, we have people who are opposing the Raughat railway line. As of today, I think they're doing some andolan over there. They're just asking for jobs. They're not saying we don't want the railway line. All they're saying is, give us jobs. You have taken away our land, you've taken away our livelihood, at least give us jobs. These are not people who are saying no to development. But again, their consent has not been taken. And they're sitting on the railway track, they're trying to, whatever, they're sitting somewhere today.
So, I just want to add one thing, that Deposit 13, which Shalini mentioned, is one of the most sacred sites for the local region. It's there's Nandraj, who's a local deity. Raughat has the Rao, who's, so all of these hills, which are like, are rich in iron, are also rich in culture, rich in religion for the local people. And it's as if, they have no right to their own culture, their own religion, and all that matters is the iron ore.
I don't know. No, that is what I was asking. Is there no kind of effort by the state government or the central government to bring Adivasis or the local inhabitants of the region to the table, to the discussion table at all? And the decisions are just being imposed on them?
Well, it's not like there is, the government would say that because there are elections and there are elected representatives and they are working through them, there are panchayats. But the point is that when people do raise legitimate demands, they're often met with repression, right? So it's, democracy is not just about elections.
Yes.
Right? So government tries to make it sound as if just because you've had elections and you have MLAs and MPs, everything is fine. But we also know that the money for those Adivasi MLAs, MPs comes from the party, and who's financing the party? It's the mineral mining companies, it's the traders. So they don't act necessarily in the interests of Adivasis, right? They act in the interests of the people who are funding the party. And that's where we see across the country. And secondly, when you see this Moolvasi Bachao Manch, which has been banned now and all the leaders arrested, these are local youth who are raising demands. Government claim is that they're a Maoist.
And these were all peaceful protests.
These were entirely peaceful protests. So even if the government claims that they are a Maoist front, what in their own activities has criminalized them? Nothing. They have been carrying out entirely constitutional activities, demanding PESA, to be implemented, demanding compensation and prosecution when people have been killed. So, it's like you say that we don't want violence, we don't want an armed group, but you yourself arm people in Salvajudom. Then you say that people who've been carrying out peaceful protests, they are also illegal. So where is there any space for local people to voice their demands?
And there's also the other development that a lot of surrendered Naxals who surrender because they want to lead a peaceful life. We hear reports that they have also been armed by the state to fight the Naxals then. So how do you see this development? For many, it would seem like pitting one section of Adivasis against another group which are supporting the Maoists, for example.
So that's what that 2011 Supreme Court judgment had actually taken on, saying that because many of these DRG are surrendered Maoists, that they deserve a chance to live a peaceful life, right? If your only employment is in the police forces, you're not really giving people an opportunity to be properly rehabilitated. Because, so there are two things. One is that when people surrender or are arrested, the cases against them are not dropped. It's dependent on their good behavior. So in a way, the government always has that sword hanging over their head if they don't carry out whatever the government does, right? So they can be either Gopniya Sainiks or they can be DRG or whatever. So that is one thing. And so the Supreme Court judgment had said that it's violating their rights under Article 19 and under 21, basically under 21, to have a dignified life post surrender. And that is something government has just refused to acknowledge, because they just treat them as sort of force multipliers, and you know, and the Supreme Court judgment actually explicitly
do they don't have any say
that.
in not taking up arms?
No,
given?
I think some of them can refuse, but because that's the only employment. Like, what are you going to do, right? As you're not.
So there's one side, Nandini, where okay, there's a violent group, Maoist, which against whom the state has launched a military operation. Then, but there are other peaceful resistance movements against these kind of mining activities or setting up of security camps across the whole region, which has kind of, Bastar is probably one of the biggest militarized zones currently in India. So even those voices are being kind of suppressed almost brutally by the police force. So the whole idea of wiping out Maoists or and these kind of claimed successes of the government, is there a possibility that these kind of celebrations may end up alienating the Adivasis more from these mainstream idea of having a peaceful, like from the state government or the central government?
I don't know.
What kind of feeling would that generate if there are people who are, a large section of Adivasis are feeling alienated? They are now kind of feeling that they are not getting any say in how they should go, the whole region should go forward, and everything is an imposition. What kind of a political ground it may kind of, one can see, say for example, the Maoist party is wiped out, but there could be other resistance movements in the future.
There could be, and there will be, I'm sure, when mining comes, but it's also a lot of other stuff has been going on. The RSS has been very active there, so they've created also a class of kind of Hindutva Adivasis. So there is that issue that is happening, right? There's also lots of outsiders coming in. Also, people need, there's been a lot of migration to Andhra for, you know, to work as in the chili fields in Andhra. So I don't know how going forward people are going to find a path for themselves. It's hard to say, but what is certain is that the government is not, by not wanting a political resolution of this, it's leaving the ground open for a lot of sort of messy bloodshed in the future.
In the future, yeah. Shalini, you want to weigh in on this?
No, I just, I mean, I completely agree with Nandini. It's unclear what the future, what kind of political mobilizations will happen in the future. But it is clear that the government has made it amply clear that they're not at this point willing to hear a political opposition on this. And I think, I mean, Maoist party, as you said, is an armed party. They could have all kinds of issues. But the case of Mulwasi Bachao Manch, I mean, that's really sad. I mean, here you had a group of really bright youngsters. It doesn't matter, you know, who they were influenced by, or what they were doing was completely legal. And since 2021, they've been sitting continuously on protest. They started with the Silgate firing. So for three and a half years, they had carried out peaceful protests, continually in dialogue with the SPs, the collectors of the districts. And yet you thought that this kind of opposition is something that the government is not willing to tolerate. And in fact, the notification banning them also, I mean, the allegation against them is that they're opposing the development works of the government and opposing the security camps and roads and bridges that are being built to implement this development works of the development policies of the government. So very clearly that opposition to development works or development policies is what's being highlighted even in the government notification. It's not an allegation of violent activities. It's not, secessionist activities. It is, for the first time, we're seeing the opposition of development works by the government is enough to actually criminalize a whole generation of people and illegitimize the. So the government's thing is very clear that we're not in a mood to tolerate any kind of opposition to what we want to put forth.
In fact, I just wanted to say, even Manish Kunjam, who's such a leader of such long standing, his house was raided. They have been from January onwards raising allegations of corruption in the Tendu bonus distribution, and the police raided his house and took away his phones. He's the one who complained about the allegations, and they're raiding his phones in the Tendu scam. I mean, this is like beyond,
So there's no effort as this whole military exercise has kind of given some kind of impunity not to initiate any kind of trust building measures, as I see. But there are many people, these allegations, how do we see in this whole military kind of speak by the government? How do we see that allegations of fake encounters of innocent villagers in the name of killing Maoists, and where is the redressal mechanism of that? And there's so much of incentivization to the security forces because to kill rather than arrest or take the alleged Maoist through due process. There's so much of incentivizing killing and them. So how do we kind of like see these kind of developments in such a sensitive area where the government desperately needs to have some trust building measures with the local people there?
So about 500 people have been killed now, I think, with the latest tally, right? Since the beginning of 24, since the BJP came.
Only in the last 6 months, I was looking at some figures. Over 200 people have been killed and 7,000. Yeah. So as part of Operation Kagar, what they say. Yeah.
So the 2025 rehabilitation and surrender policy of the government in 8.81 specifically says that you will be whoever catches the security forces will who catch a Maoist will be given a reward, whether they're dead or alive, right? So if they're alive, you have to share the reward with them. If they're dead, you don't have to share the reward. So that's number one, that it's really, as you said, incentivizing killing. Secondly, it's not like they issue a list of people beforehand in terms of who's wanted, right? So people are declared wanted post facto. So whether they were actually, such a dreaded Maoist that they carried a reward of 10 lakhs or they were just an ordinary cadre or an ordinary villager, we don't know, because it's the police which declares them. And if you look at the reward amounts, so, for Politburo members, it's 1 crore. For Basavaraju, I think it's over 1 crore. Yeah, 10 crores, I think. Or 1 point. So it's, these are huge amounts, and people will, and what's worrying is then that you're corrupting your own police force, you're corrupting your security forces, because you're making you're making it all about money rather than about efficiency or discipline. What the whole country needs is a disciplined security force, a disciplined armed force. And by doing this, you're actually introducing indiscipline, which is really harmful for everybody in the long run, right? It's to corrupt your own security forces is really dangerous. The second thing I want to mention is that, when we filed the case against Basavaraju. And I just want to read out how many cases we had, which the NHRC also found. In many cases we found from the submissions to the NHRC. So in the original complaint given by Kartam Joga and others, there were 111 villages, 537 killed, 99 rapes culled out of those, 1,733 houses burnt in Bijapur, 1,092 houses burnt in Konta, and these are huge underestimates. And none of them have got, and over the years we have many, many more complaints, right? So what has been submitted to the Supreme Court over these last 20 years is some, 833 individual complaints. Many of them are not even individual because they are mass atrocities, right? The whole village got burnt. And this many organizations found, the NHRC also found, the Supreme Court also found that they were all guilty, and yet nobody has got anything. So where is the hope for, the only people who are getting compensated are victims of Naxalites or security forces. All those people who have been killed, raped, houses burnt by security forces, by police, by Basavaraju, by SPOs, by DRG, nothing. So, and the Supreme Court has just closed the case saying we don't have continuing mandamus. So who should people go to for their fundamental rights? If in a country which claims to be governed by the Constitution, are these people outside the bounds of the Constitution? Are they not citizens of this country? Are they not entitled to justice? For 20 years we've been seeing this repeated pattern, and Shalini can tell you about the Sarkeguda and Edis Mehta cases and what's happened to that.
Versus over 1 crore, I think 1.2 crore.
So it's, these are huge amounts, and people will, and what's worrying is then that you're corrupting your own police force, you're corrupting your security forces, because you're making you're making it all about money rather than about efficiency or discipline. What the whole country needs is a disciplined security force, a disciplined armed force. So where is the hope for, the only people who are getting compensated are victims of Naxalites or security forces. All those people who have been killed, raped, houses burnt by security forces, by police, by Basavaraju, by SPOs, by DRG, nothing. So, and the Supreme Court has just closed the case saying we don't have continuing mandamus. So who should people go to for their fundamental rights? If in a country which claims to be governed by the Constitution, are these people outside the bounds of the Constitution? Are they not citizens of this country? Are they not entitled to justice? For 20 years we've been seeing this repeated pattern, and Shalini can tell you about the Sarkeguda and Edis Mehta cases and what's happened to that.
Those were large, there were 70.
Those were also very prominent cases in which
Instances, a judicial inquiry commission found that they were all innocent villagers, and unilateral firing by the security forces. And in spite of that finding by a judicial inquiry commission, we still have no action against the people, the perpetrators till now. So no FIR yet, no inquiry into those yet.
We also had cases of revenge killing by security forces in Tarmetla or Morpalli when they were celebrating 1 year of the Maoist backlash against. So we have had so many number of cases, and what has happened to those cases? People had noticed the institutions of India, they had noticed these things, but nothing moved.
So again, there have been several instances where the complaints of the villagers have been found to be true and correct at most, and that in a few number of cases there's been some compensation given to them, which in many cases, because the people have gone away from there, the people are not interested, hasn't even been given to the people. But in no case at all has any guilty person been, a police officer, any kind of even departmental disciplinary proceedings have not been forget criminal proceedings against them. Even departmental
Inquiries have also not happened.
The Tadmetla case, the CBI found that SPOs were guilty of burning the villages, right? And they were released on bail immediately. They were living in police lines. Where is the question of, any proper prosecution? And the CBI was also asked to inquire into rapes and things. And they go to this village, they go to Tadmetla, in fact, where a woman was burnt, was raped, and she had actually said this at a public meeting with Swami Agnivesh, etc. They go after 1 year. She had 2 saris, she was washing them every day. After a year, they go and say, they take one of her saris for forensic evidence, the one that she was wearing on that day, and say, no forensic evidence found, so could not substantiate the rape. I mean, in every other case, the Supreme Court says, go by the testimony of the woman. Here is a testimony she's made publicly. There's a cut in her eye. And the CBI closes it saying, can't do anything because no evidence found on her sari after 1 year. I mean, this is the state of our premier investigating agency.
So finally, like to end this discussion, where does Bastar go from here? Like right now we have a situation where the state, where the government has gotten an important kind of success in killing of Basavaraju. The other civil society protest movements have also been brutally kind of suppressed and silenced. And so now there seems to be a situation where the government has achieved what it has set out to do, and there are no kind of civils right now in the horizon, any kind of peaceful or violent, any kind of resistance movement to the what the government had set out to do. So what do we see? How do you see Bastar going from here, and what happens to the numerous adivasis who live there?
I really don't know. I mean, I just wish that the government would agree to peace talks because we need a political resolution for this. It cannot.
What kind of political resolution are you kind of thinking of right now?
It's not up to me, it's up to people who are in Bastar, it's up to the government, it's up to the Maoists. So I think they have to consult with people and find out what they want. And people are saying they want peace talks, they want something. So I don't know, it's going to be a really scary future, I think, for people.
Yeah. Is it incumbent on the government now that these kind of threats, security threats, have been kind of neutralized, as they say? Is it incumbent on the government to implement acts like PESA or Forest Rights Act?
It was incumbent on the government even without that.
Yeah, but they always had these, that there's a lot of security threat, we couldn't do that. Yeah.
Interesting to see that. So as of yesterday, I think the 7 districts of Bastar division, 2 districts have been declared to be Naxal free, Bastar and Kondagaon, both of them. It'll be, and soon with this, maybe others will also be declared to be LWE free areas now. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the security apparatus that has happened over there. Are those camps going to go back? Are those lands going to go back to the villagers? Are those, because security had become an excuse for many of the things that were happening over there. Even I remember when we pointed out in the High Court that for the Raughat, so many statutory steps had not been taken. The decision came that no, it's a very special case. There is a Naxalite influence over there. So therefore, the government is well within its rights to bypass some of these obligations. Now that is not going to be an excuse. Are we going to see a strict implementation of the environmental and other laws? I don't know. I mean, seeing what's happened elsewhere, I feel they will still wriggle out of it and find some other excuse to not implement those laws strictly. But let's see. I mean, that at least, as you say, if that if that threat is gone, then we should be able to ask in a louder voice.
We'll end our discussion here. So now that the government has apparently gotten rid of the imminent security threats in Bastar, the big question is whether now the Modi government is willing to hear the demands and the concerns raised by Adivasis for such a long time. And the big question is whether they get to kind of have their say in the way Bastar is developed from now on or not. And this is something we will be looking at in the wire. And thank you, Nandini. Thank you, Shalini, so much for joining us in this discussion. Goodbye.